shape because you were on the run from the law. Well, after doing time, things have changed. But getting in good shape can still be a real pain in the ass. Searching through 50 different brands and models, paying for nonsense features where your razor doubles as a flashlight, toothpick, vibrator. That's right, vibrator. Chicks dig it. Anyway, who wants to pay $20 for some new razors? Join our society of smarter men. Go to dollarshaveclub.com/Paul to get high quality razors delivered to your door for just a couple of bucks a month. They made it simple. High quality razors, 100% guaranteed, sent on schedule, so you never have to think about it again. Every month you get a new pack, and every week you change your blades. DollarShaveClub.com has made it easy to get a good shave and to save money while you're doing it. Next time you find yourself looking for that dirty, rusty razor, remember, there's a better way. Go to dollarshaveclub.com/Paul. Great razors delivered to your door. Save money and shave well. dollarshaveclub.com/Paul.
Warriors, come out to play it. Warriors, come out to play it. One day, the Rockets beat. One day, something was good. Without us allowing it to happen.
Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast. Very, very excited about this week's guest, up-and-coming comic. I think you'll be hearing a lot about him in the coming months and years. He's about to break big. Jay Leno. Very, very, very excited to have him on the podcast. Really fun interview. We talked about stand-up, how he got started, some great war stories that he has. Just a really fun conversation. Covered a lot of different stuff. I think you're really going to enjoy it. And if you want to check me out doing stand-up, I'll be in New York City in the coming weeks. My schedule's on my website, paulmecurio.com, on my Facebook page, and you can follow me on Twitter at paulmecurio. Enjoy the podcast.
We got the street, suckers! And you
I just want to thank you for doing this, man. I've been doing this podcast because the world needs another comedian with a podcast.
That's right.
And I thought I got to get Jay because you're the reason I got started in this business.
Yeah, we go back a long time.
I was a lawyer on Wall Street, and I was writing jokes as a hobby. I don't know why. And you were performing for a private function for R.R. Donnelly Company, which is a printer that opened up this huge worldwide headquarters down on Wall Street.
Yeah, that's right. I remember going down the basement. They printed like 50,000 books an hour.
Prospectuses for stocks and stuff
yeah.
like that. And I was doing corporate law, and we worked with them. So because we worked with them, we were a client, they gave us some tickets. And I was a young associate. I'm like, I'm too busy. And friends like, come. It's Jay Leno. I'm like, I was a huge fan of comedy at the time. I was a huge fan of yours. And I'm like, all right. And I had these jokes, and I printed them out. And you performed, and you were super nice and said, hi to everybody afterwards. And I went up to you real sheepishly, and I had these jokes. And I'm like, hey, I got jokes. And you took them. You were real nice. And I got about 50 feet away. And you go, hey, come back here. And I thought, this guy's just going to come back to me. He goes, you may want to put your name and your phone number on here. So
That's right, yeah, so you know.
Right.
You know how many people do that? Well, Leno never called. Jerk. There's no name. There's no...
So I still think, you were being nice, and I'm never going to hear from you again. And 2 days later, I think you were there doing a gig at St. John's. You were there for like 2 or 3 days in New York.
I remember what it was exactly.
And I come home, and I got a list of messages. Your mother called, the dry cleaning's ready, Jay Leno called. I'm like, get out of here. I'm like, yeah. And you called, and we played phone tag, and we talked that night. And you read the stuff, and you said, it's clean. I'm looking for stuff for the Tonight Show. Start sending some stuff in. I'm like, really? I never expected to hear it. And then you said to me, what do you do for a living? I go, I'm a lawyer. And you started laughing on the phone. I knew it. I go, why? He goes, because your setups are way too long. You're too wordy.
Yeah. Protect yourself. And the first, and when I saw plaintiff in the setup, that's when
I literally was giving you stage direction, make funny face here.
Yeah.
And so then about a week later, you called me, and you did one of my jokes, my first joke, the first one that you did of mine on the Tonight Show, and it blew my head off my shoulders.
Oh, that's fine.
And I went, we watched it, we got a bottle of champagne, my wife and I, and another couple, and it was just incredible. And it got me obsessed with writing jokes.
And so, now your parents hate me.
Right, it's like, and so I had, middle-class kids, much like you from New England, me from Rhode Island, you from Andover, Mass, Italian family, my father put floors in for a living. It's like I made it, and now do I turn my back on this thing? But I I had no inkling this was coming. Like in your case, I don't know. Did you know, like in high school, like this was your path? Did you know you were?
Well, I didn't know I didn't know what I would do actually. My dad was an insurance salesman, and once a month, my dad would have to do a little something in the office to inspire the men, and it was all men selling insurance.
Yeah.
You know, like a funny show or some jokes, or you know, he'd play like the High Hope song by Frank Sinatra, and then he'd put his own lyrics in. You know, dealing with insurance. I thought, well, that's probably what I enjoyed helping him with that.
Right.
So I thought, well, maybe that's what I'll do: get a job selling insurance where I could get to be funny.
Right. So you would like write some of the stuff with him.
Yeah, like little jokes and
Yeah.
things. I was a teenager, you know. It was more just to do stuff.
Were you funny with your friends? Were you like the funniest one among your friends?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, there's a fine line between annoying and funny. But when you grow up in New England, I always remember the lady next door said, you know, you can't be a comedian unless your father was a comedian. That's the way it is in California. You can't just be a comedian. Your father has to be a comedian. You know, I mean, everybody, it's one of the few professions people know nothing about it. Feel free to give this advice as if they've been in the business.
Well, the other thing you get is, so you're doing stand-up, so, like, when are you going to, you know, get bigger stuff? And, like, I think Colin Quinn made the point, like, isn't it just good enough to be, like, a really good stand-up? And, like there's no other profession where someone goes, okay, so you're an accountant, but when are you going to be a CEO someday? Like, they always want to bump you up to, like, movie star and TV
it doesn't
star.
work that way.
And so now you're, like, sort of just tinkering around with this stuff. And you planning on going to college at this point? Or, like, you know?
No, my parents wanted me to go to college, and I said I would. I went to Bentley School of Accounting and Finance for about a year, and that because I'm dyslexic. I don't know why I went there. And then I went down to Emerson, and that was a real good school. But they didn't have a comedy program. At that point, Emerson was mostly about serious performing arts. And comedy was not something... But I was working in the Playboy clubs on weekends and doing stuff like that. So it's a great school, and it's even greater school now. But I didn't put a lot into it, so consequently I didn't get a lot out of it.
Yeah.
You know, I would drive to New York every night after class to perform at the Improv in New York. So I didn't get home till 1:30 or 2.
Weren't you working on cars?
Yeah,
and
I
you
was
would take
working.
the cars you would work on?
Yeah,
and drive them down?
I'm working 10 cars. I was working. I drive to New York. Hey, this car's got 800 test miles. Yeah, most people never knew.
No one knew?
No, nobody knew 52,800 miles from 53,800. I mean, nobody looked at that.
That's what? And you literally go down for the night.
I go down for the night, yeah.
Well, but Boston wasn't it? There was
No, there really wasn't a lot in Boston. The Improv was the club. Don't forget, this was a time... I used to do colleges in Boston, but it was mostly Stop Your War Machine, you know, guys with guitars and, you know, and that kind of stuff. People really weren't doing comedy.
There weren't comedy clubs like this.
No, there were no... The Improv, you know, the big joke was always a singer than you. That's what Bud would say. At the Improv in New York, you'd have 4 or 5 Broadway singers, then a comic. And in fact, after about the first 7 or 8 months, Bud would ask us to pretend to be people auditioning for the first time because there weren't enough people doing comedy. It just
really,
well, it wasn't something people really did.
And this is before Catch a Rising Star. This is like
Catch a Rising Star opened probably 70, 71.
Up on First Avenue, right?
Yeah.
Near the Green Kitchen.
Yeah,
Did you say you used to go and hang out at the
Green Kitchen, all those places. Upstairs, at the downstairs, the Bitter End, Cafe Wa, all those places. Blue Note. There was all kinds of clubs around. It was a different... See, back then, like in Boston, I used to play a place called Lenny's on the Turnpike.
I've heard of that name.
But I would open for like Miles Davis and these kind of people. But they would come in and they'd do 6 nights in a 250-seat room.
Right.
And you got a steak dinner and Miles Davis and a comedian. It was $12.95. You know.
Unbelievable.
And then suddenly they started to put up theaters in the round in places that were like 3,400 seats.
Yeah.
So Miles Davis could come in for one night
and
make why stay a whole week?
Right.
You know, I remember what closed Lenny's on the Turnpike. The biggest act he ever hired, Chris Christopherson, for like $15,000 for like 5 nights, which was huge money back in the day.
Yeah.
And it was a huge snowstorm. And nobody came, and Lenny kind of went broke because he had to pay the act and the band. And that was the end of that. And that was the fate of a lot of clubs. You know, there was Paul's Mall. These were cool little jazz places. Mr. Kelly's in Chicago.
Where the comedy was almost incidental to the music, right? It was sort of a little
Well,
like
interesting.
appetizer in a way to the main event.
I used to work burlesque strip clubs.
Yeah, what was Lenny Bruce did the same thing.
Yeah, and that was like, hey, Peckerhead, get off the stage. You know that.
Nobody's paying attention to you, right?
No, I used to work with strippers, and I mean, it was an interesting army shows, and I worked with these two strippers, Lily Pagan and I Need a Man, and that was their names. But they weren't like whores or prostitutes. They were like women that didn't finish high school, never learned to type.
Yeah.
And you back in those days, it was secretarial work or stripping, and it's old school stripping. You know, 35 minutes. They'd come on in parkers and mittens and gloves, as many clothes as you could wear. It wasn't like now they run out naked and turn around and run away. I mean, it wasn't, attention spans were much greater.
Yeah.
And I would open for them, and that's what I would do. And it was terrible audiences, and it
I
was
was going to
awful.
say, like it's to the exponentially different, but in a way similar. Like starting out as a comic, open mic nights in these bar rooms where basically the only people in the audience are other comics or drunks that borrow money on the street. So how are you honing your material?
Well, the good thing was nobody was paying attention, so you didn't know how badly you sucked. You got stage time, and you just learned how to work the room. What I used to do in Boston was I used to go into bars I had $50 bills, and I'd say to the bar, "I'm a comedian. Can I get on stage?" And they'd say, "No, we don't do comedy." And I'd say, "Here's $50. If I do bad and people leave, keep the 50. If I do good and people like, give me the 50 back."
Wow.
And that worked. People go, "Okay," and they take the 50. I go on stage and I tell some people, "Oh, that was okay. Okay, you can come back next week." Oh, okay. And that kind of worked. Because you'd always, and that worked for me.
Did you do some crowd work too to grab their attention?
Yeah, but playing to audiences that couldn't care less was actually good practice because you just didn't know how bad you were. I remember the first time I went to Lenny's, I opened for Buddy Rich, and that was a jazz audience. They put on comedian Jay Leno, they always went, shh, shh. Well, I had never walked on stage to silence. And I realized, oh man, I'm not really that. This is really
now all eyes are on you.
Now you start taping your material and honing it down, honing it down.
Right.
You know, for comics, your whole life is usually your first 5 minutes. Your first 5 minutes will usually define the rest of your comedy career. What you do in that first 5 minutes of your stand-up kind of sets the tone for the kind of humor you're going to do. It all comes out of that.
You mean the first 5 minutes on any given night on any given show?
No, the first time you get on stage. What are your first 5 minutes? I'm not talking about memorizing a George Carlin routine or doing two guys going to a bar. I mean, whatever you choose to talk about, the first couple of times you get on stage sort of says who you are.
But some guys, like if George Carlin had AMF, I mean, he kind of completely went 180 and sort of grow into a different being.
Well, he got freer, but it was basically George Carlin was always funny.
Right.
It was just a different style of funny, but if you study comedy, you realize it was the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, the hippy dippy weatherman. Really wasn't that different. He just became the hippie.
Yeah. It's always taking a shot at authority.
Yeah, he went from gentle shots to just power punches.
Yeah.
But it was always George Carlin. Even when George Carlin was in the comedy team, it was the same thing.
How conscious of you early on were you of your voice and what my voice is and what it needs to be, or do you just, as they say in sports, let the game come to you and eventually your voice kind of emerges from your writing and your stand-up?
Most comics are inherently pretty lazy, so you tend to gravitate to where the audience is. And, I would always tell young comics in Boston, when you start to get popular here in Boston, get out, because it's a trap. Because there are guys in Boston who were making $1,000 a weekend, which was huge money.
There's like 5 or 6 guys.
But what happened is, suddenly you go to New York City with your material on the mayor of Boston or your bit about the North End, and they don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
So that I realized, oh boy, people in Boston are laughing. Let me go keep trying to find the place where they're not laughing.
Yeah.
And play that. When I first came to town, I used to go on. Right, I'd follow Richard Pryor every night at the Comedy Center. Because I would say, put me on after Richie. Nobody wanted to go after Richie because he would blow the room out.
Yeah.
So I